David Bohm Seminars, Series 1, Saturday morning, November 4th, session number 2, Oak Grove School, Ojai, California.
Yeah, well, I think we perhaps should continue on this line discussing insensitivity and being sensitive to insensitivity. You see, it sounds like a paradox, but it isn't really. See, I was saying that insensitivity has a kind of structure. You know, and some of the metaphors we use are not very helpful about it. They may help a little, but I think we require some real attention there. And for example, when you find yourself defending something or whatever, or something there, when there's something you don't want to know about, what do you actually experience? Fear, but where do you experience the fear? Where?
Chicken and the egg again. Yeah, right?
No, but I mean, let's look at just the phenomena alone. I'm saying just to pay attention to what's actually the phenomenon, wherever it appears, right? And, all right, you say the stomach now, the pit of the stomach,
Pressure in the chest,
the chest, the leaping of the heart into the throat,
the lower back,
the lower back.
headache.
You're saying that you have a physical response, whatever it happens to be, it's a physiological.
Yes, I mean, let's just pay attention to it. You see, part of our thought is that that's not worth paying attention to. Isn't that clear that our whole society implies that stuff is not worth paying any attention to? You've got to keep your eye on the point, right? But now the point is just how are we going to be sensitive to what's happening, right?
Well, sometimes it's so intense. It was at the time I almost felt I would have a heart attack because I had an insensitive attack. I was with somebody. It was so surprisingly insensitive at 1 second, and I was at that moment very relaxed. That I felt such a pressure around the heart. I almost felt I would have a heart attack.
Yeah, well, how did that happen?
First was, I may say now that there was a surprise of the insensitive.
Well, you felt the other person was insensitive.
Yes, then I was so deeply relaxed in that stage of what we call harmony, so deeply relaxed. And then I think in that deep relaxation, it is the sensitivity is not suppressed, and that's why I picked up right away that intensity, like a violence of the insensitive, and I almost got scared. So every time I would be around, I would run away because I was scared. But now it was not anymore surprising because I knew that this in this case was really sensitive. So my whole organism was more ready to deal with that.
Yeah, so you've got to see how you could get a shock in the heart.
A shock, yes, a shock.
Yes, and some people may get heart attacks from that if the heart is weak, right? You know, a sudden shock can actually affect the heart that way. Yes, I mean, so that's one way. Now, let's try to get a view of all around.
Well, I once had what you call an anxiety attack, where I couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to choke, and it also duplicated sort of a heart. My husband took me to the hospital because we thought it was a heart attack, but it wasn't, and it was an anxiety attack.
Yeah, so somehow there's a reaction there which can affect the body, and it has a great deal of emotional significance. And
it happened to me yesterday morning. Just about my situation to pass out or pass away. I was so badly manipulated in the hospital that really it was beyond any endurance. And then suddenly I pulled an emergency cord, thinking of my daughter, she needs me, and pulled me back. I was frozen, all sweat down, and it was the end of it. It pulled out of it.
Right. So anyway, that's another way it comes. You see that?
I'm saying it not out of memory because it's happened just
Yeah,
yesterday.
that's right. Yeah.
I've had the experience that somebody's telling me something and I suddenly feel like the whole room is spinning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like, I know it's something I don't want to hear, so all of a sudden my whole equilibrium could go.
Yeah. So you see that the meaning of something can have a very powerful reaction on the body. You see, I said meaning is being. You see, we generally say that there is what is the being, and then besides that we mean something about it. But we can see what it means is what we are. You see, it affects our being, right? See, the whole being responds to the meaning.
Also, if one is speaking with someone and the person is lying or not telling the truth in a situation, one also gets something in the body that seems to say something's wrong. I'd say in the solar plexus.
Well, there are all sorts of places it can happen in the solar plexus or in the chest, in the heart, or in the breathing. There can be disturbance of breathing, which you may not notice, right?
Does it also happen in the process of the thought? Like we use the expression of when challenged, maybe we don't feel it in solar plexus, but the mind goes blank, that type of thing.
Yes, that's another one, just to blank out, you see. Or else there's another way, you can, do you ever get a sense of anesthesia? Anesthesia literally means no feeling, right?
But is that clinically correct? I mean,
What?
we say like the brain itself, our thought isn't proprioceptive, so are we misleading ourselves?
Why?
That it's not really felt in the brain.
Well, there's no evidence that you feel it in the brain, but you see, it's always, in one sense, the brain is involved, but in another sense, the pain must be attributed to something else than the brain, right?
So when we say maybe it's in the deeper nervous centers.
Yes, and also it's attributed to that part of the body that would normally affect those nerve centers. For example, I once had fibrositis, and see, there's a sort of a pressure between the spine on a nerve there, and it affected the hand. You see, it affected the nerve which is coming from the hand. So then I felt the pain was in the hand, though the trouble was back there, right? It was being projected out here, but it was not merely mentally projected out, but the whole body took that to mean that, so that the whole hand inflamed.
It's the syndrome of the ghost leg.
Yeah.
Ghost leg.
The ghost leg, when a leg is cut off, you still feel it. And the point is that that the whole physical chemical system responds to the meaning of that signal, right?
Are some people so protective of themselves that they don't allow themselves to respond physically, but they cover it up?
Well, they try to cover it up, but there probably is stress.
But then if they stress, it has to come out somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it does, usually. The more they hold back, the more stress may get worse. It may come out in a heart attack. Yeah. High blood pressure, yes.
One morning I was early at work in front of my desk, and I was awaiting a call that I felt was crucial about physical from a doctor. And suddenly the typewriter in the chair seemed to fall to the right. So when I recovered, I said to the girl who passed through, I said, what time was that earthquake? She said there wasn't an earthquake. So then I went to lie down. I thought I had a stroke or something.
Yeah, well, you see that there are all these examples. I mean, if we could see some more, that the meaning of the thing affects the body. Now, but that's one point. You want to say something?
There are some other situations that are different. For example, sometimes when I discover something that profoundly affects me, like somebody discovers tremendous injustice is going on, and somehow I feel it here, and tears come out of my eyes, and I feel sobbing. When I not only something bad is happening, but discover something that I never understood. So there's another way that the body responds to it.
Yes, I mean, the body will respond to any kind of meeting, even good meetings, bad meetings. See, a good meeting, they relax the body.
There's things medically that some patients have stress and tension headaches. And if they look at the color green, which is like a forest or a hillside, without them being aware of it, in 2 or 3 minutes, just their whole body stress and temperaments change. They just naturally feel some joyful mood.
Yeah, well, that's the same thing. The green means peace or quiet or cool. You see, a red may mean the opposite.
It's kind of freedom.
Well, yeah.
To that.
But see, according to what it means, there's a reaction. And perhaps I ought to say, you see, people have called that psychosomatic, but I think it's a poor name, you see, because it suggests two entities, psyche, mind or soul, and soma is body, right? That they're interacting as if they're separate but interacting. Now, I want to suggest that they're really not separate. Now, see, meaning is really from the side of mind, right? You see, one of the most fundamental features of mind would be meaning, right? If you had no meaning, it's hard to say you had a mind, right? If there were neither significance nor value nor purpose, what would you have? Or what would you be, right? It might be a computer. So you have a meaning, and meaning affects the physical and the chemical, and so on, right? So, on the other hand, the physical and the chemical and the form of things outside and inside has meaning, right? Is that clear? This is a table. You see, that's what it means to me, right? If nobody, somebody else, it might mean something else, huh? A rectangular object. Or if we're short of wood, it might mean a source of firewood, you see, if we... right? So, therefore, everything you see, every form you see has meaning, has at least that form, significance, right? It has that significance. Whatever you perceive it through its significance. If it's a line, that's what it means, what its significance, right? If it's a curve, or if it's a leaf, if it's a green, if it's red, it all has different significance, right?
Is it accurate to say then that there's sort of a taking in of just kind of raw information, like somebody challenges you or whatever, you look at something and then as it's coming in, there's an interpretation made that's akin to what your conditioning is regarding that particular stimulus.
Yes, it's not merely an interpretation. You see, the word interpretation can be used that way, but literally it means to translate, like the price between is the root of the thing. It sort of carries the value from one language to another, right? To interpret. But you can use interpret as meaning as one of the... But meaning is a much broader notion than interpretation. It includes value and purpose. It includes something much deeper, right? See, now, it may be that the past interprets it, but also it may be you see the meaning fresh, not from the past. Something new, right? Or it's a fusion of the two. Right? So we say in all these different ways the meaning emerges. We see the meaning, right? Now, everything has some meaning, partly based on the past, partly there may be some new perception. To perceive a new meaning is something creative, right? If you see a new meaning, that's the beginning of a new creation. Any new thing we ever did started with seeing a different meaning. So the first step is the creative step of seeing a new meaning, which we could call creative imagination, if you like. Now, and then it starts to work out. You see, now the meaning will affect the body and it will affect what you do and everything, right? Now, so we have two processes going on. One is we are taking in meaning. We see the meaning of everything. We partake of meaning, right? It becomes part of us. The other is the meaning acts outwardly, right? Going the other way. So I would like to introduce two words that might, if you like, express that. You see, if I tell you the body is called Soma, right? And now, suppose we say, extend that notion, the body is not separate from the whole of matter, the whole of nature, the whole of the universe, right? There's no place where the body is separate from that. Is that clear? When you take in carbon dioxide, oxygen, it doesn't suddenly become your body. See? And then when the carbon dioxide goes out, it stops being, In one sense, you could say it's all your body, or it's part of it, right? You see, there's a constant flow. Now, therefore, your body doesn't really end at the skin, right? Because if the oxygen were not supplied, it wouldn't last very long, right? If the water were not there, and so on, the food, and the information you get in the form of meaning, right? So, so I want to suggest that that we should stop thinking the body is separate from matter in general. That's only relatively separate. For certain purposes, we can call it separate. But if we take it absolutely separate, it's a mistake.
There's some kind of an interaction that goes on, because there's a movement in and out, or back and forth, or however between. It's hard to put it into words, but my experience is that I interact with the environment and the people around me, and there's this movement going back and forth. It's sort of like it's coming in and it's going out. And you're saying that the mistake we make is that we make an arbitrary division?
Well, we make it too sharp. You see, we establish a boundary of the body at the skin. For some purposes, that's right. When the connection is loose, we can call that a boundary, right? You see, for example, if a blind man holds a stick tightly, he feels that he ends at the end of the stick, right? He feels it as part of his body. Because the connection is loose to the ground but tight to the stick, right? If he loosens his hold on the stick, then he ends at his fingers. Now, he may think I'm somewhere inside me, and I end further inside somewhere, some spirit, some being inside is looking at the body, right? Or he may extend and say, I extend out to my country, and if my country is attacked, I am attacked. Or he could extend and say, the whole universe is me, and I am the universe, right? You see, you could change that according to the context. Is that clear? So we have too rigid an idea of that boundary now, just as we have of national boundaries. It's the same problem. See, there's no more justification for drawing an absolute boundary of the body and the rest of the universe than there is to draw it between one country and another. See, between one country and another, you pass all sorts of things, pass trade and information and everything, right? The pollution goes...
The feeling is related to thought.
Yeah, so thought produces that felt, right, of being separate. But first, our wrong thought produces that sense of being separate, of me being inside here and the rest of the universe out there, right? Now, if you feel that way, then you're going to act that way. You act according to what it means, right? And therefore, you will be ready to exploit the nature. You see, if you say my body is part of nature, then it doesn't make sense to exploit it, right?
So, I am a mistake in every possible...
Well, not entirely. No, I'm saying that there's a tremendous amount of mistaken thought around the words I am, which we have to go into.
However I think of it, if I think there's got to be a mistake.
Well, it looks that way, but let's try to not judge the issue beforehand, you see.
When you say you're not separate, that's a description.
Yeah.
In order to actually have that have an impact, in fact, there would have to be a direct perception that were the case.
Yeah, but what you think is going to affect your direct perception.
Get in the way of.
Or it may help, you see, if you're thinking the right thought. You see, if as a blind man you are holding the stick and you feel the stick is part of you, which is quite right, huh?
Yes.
And then you could also think that's the way it is and it would work, right? But if the blind man began to think, is that stick really part of me, then he couldn't use it to tap, right? He can't use it to tap his way unless he really feels it's part of him. Or people who drive cars or get used to it feel the car is an extension of the body, right? So therefore, the way you feel is determined, in this case, is by the way you think.
It's also variable. Like we talk about personal space, you
Yeah.
know, and there's certain people we can let closer to our personal
Yeah.
space than other people in certain situations. So the boundaries sometimes can shift.
And it shifts around according to what you think. You see, you think this person is all right, that person I don't trust, and I'm not sure of, or whatever, you see. And then you feel that way, and you see it that way, right?
Intrinsic meaning, then it's just a meaning we give.
Well, whether there is an intrinsic one or not, we'll have to come to. I'm discussing these cases where it's very dependent on what we happen to give, right? Now,
The differences I feel between psychological boundary, ego boundary, and the boundary with an instrument, for example, as a telescope
or a stick.
Instrument, a stick.
Well,
that implies fear.
What? Well, you see, you're not afraid of the stick because you know it's not going to do anything.
One person, we become afraid and we go in a spin.
Yes, that's right. That we don't understand this question of boundaries between people, and it causes fear, and it causes the body to be upset, right?
You may not want to speak about it right now, but using a metaphor, and there was the question about metaphor use earlier. Would you sometime talk about how to know about the good and bad use of metaphor?
Yeah, well, we'd have to discuss the whole question of metaphor. See, and something we discussed last time, which is we call thought of type A and B. That is thought which just thinks about things, and thought which thinks about thought, right? And the question arises. Also, the third kind of thought is there's literal thought and participatory thought and metaphorical thought. See, if we want to begin to know what thought really is, we have to look into all that. See, we know thought is the response of memory, but that is not enough because there's a lot of structure in thought, a lot of differences, right? Which we also have to know, right? It's not enough just to say that's a program jumping up, right? But there's a great deal of structure in there that has meaning, right? And you see, yeah?
Isn't the crucial variable in all this awareness? There are those situations, for example, in which the individual has lost the ability to distinguish his boundary from the rest of the world and is in great terror, such as in a schizophrenic situation or a schizophrenic episode, because that individual has no awareness that such a process is going on. However, in other situations, other contexts in which it may be convenient for us to perceive of ourselves as having a certain shall we say, a distance between ourselves and the universe.
Yes, all of that.
So the awareness is really what's
but it requires more. It requires intelligence. It requires understanding the meaning of the whole situation. See, in one situation we can see that we may call for a boundary, and in another one we call for no boundary. Now, that requires sensitivity. You see, if we're not sensitive, we'll never get the information needed to decide, right? So the point is, this is a very crucial point because a great many things is a whole question of nationalism and the ecosystem and so on is involved here, you see, as well as our personal relationships. And by the way we think, which is part of our culture, right? So based on the whole past. And so I'm just going into that a little bit and saying I would like to sort of sum it up, saying that there's a two-way process, as we're saying, where we're taking in everything, we're partaking of it. We're partaking of its meaning, right? And that affects us, the meaning. You see, you can't just say we're just taking in meaning. See, we take in food, everybody can see that. We take in air. That has a profound effect. If we didn't do that, we wouldn't live. Now, so you can see that the food we take becomes us, right? The air we take becomes us. The water we take becomes us. But also the meanings we take become us. If we're in nature, in a certain environment, we take in those meanings and become that way, right? If we live in this concrete jungle, we take that in and become that, right? You see, so therefore we're taking in all these meanings, partaking. And I'm going to call that, I'm saying the Soma, I want to use the word Soma to represent not just the body, but the whole of nature, the whole of the universe, the whole of matter. I say I'm extending that word because I think they're really all ultimately undivided, and therefore it's justifiable to use that word to represent it all. Right? Now then, we can then establish divisions for certain purposes relative as we need them, right? If we're intelligent. But then I want to call that whole process Soma-Significance. The Soma is significant, right? See, I'm not going to use the word psychosomatic because that says out there is the Soma, or here is the Soma, and somewhere deep inside is the soul which interacts with the Soma, right? Now the word interact suggests two things. I want to suggest another notion, that there's no soul inside and body outside, but we have this process of Soma-Significance, right? And the other process goes the other way. The significance acts within the Soma to affect the Soma. So I call that Signa-Somatic, right? It goes both ways, right? Soma is significant, and that is Signa-Somatic. The whole body, and in fact the whole world is affected. According to what the world means, we have produced our world, right? Everything you see around here is the effect of Signa-Somatic effect, right? The concrete jungle and all that is Signa-Somatic, right? I mean, people had it in their minds first before they made it, right? And so if we could look at it that way, there is this two-way flow. The thing comes in through perception, through sensitivity, and gives rise to meaning, which may depend on the past, or it may be fresh, or a fusion of the two. And then that whole net result of meaning is carried out into the body and into nature, right? And into society.
That kind of suggests an inherent sort of sensitivity in matter itself, then some kind of a consciousness in matter itself, that if it's taken in and there's meaning, the meaning comes and then the meaning goes forth, sort of, then the matter itself has some kind of consciousness.
Well, at least it has a kind of mental side, right? A psychic side, right? You see that? See, I would think that's reasonable, that all matter has a mental aspect that may be rudimentary. In fact, I've developed a theory, which I'm going to talk about in Santa Barbara, where I would say that even the electron has a rudimentary mind-like aspect, but it gets more and more organized and more subtle. As we go into living beings and so on, and the brain and all that. Now, so we could say ultimately this is a mutual communication of meaning. You see, see, we tend to think of motion as mechanical, right? As for pushing and pulling, right? And we say, but with people we have another way. We communicate. We don't push and pull on them. We communicate meaning if we want to get them to move, right? Is that clear? Now, on the other hand, it breaks down in the case of violence, and people do push and pull on each other, right? They go back to the mechanical. Now, but we tend to think matter is mechanical and should be we only interact by pushing and pulling, right? But the suggestion is maybe matter also in general is not mechanical. There's no sudden break between what we call living and non-living, or between intelligent, and conscious and not conscious, or intelligent, not intelligent. It's a gradation, right? And therefore, in a sense, we communicate with matter. You see, people even use the metaphor, we communicate motion to objects. That is now treated as a metaphor. right? But it may be literally so. That as a result of the communication which takes place from the more subtle levels of the mind down to the electrons and so on, the body moves, and this communicates motion to the other particles so that there's a mutual communication. Is that clear?
Yes, the process of significance happens in the brain, which is a material process.
We don't know fully. It's certainly the brain is necessary.
I find out where you're making the distinction between saying what is somatic and what is...
Well, then there'd be ultimately no distinction. It's a relative distinction, like the blind man with his stick. It depends on the context where we make the distinction, right? We may find it convenient to think this is matter, which we treat mechanically, right? But in fact it isn't, because you take that rock or whatever, it becomes part of the tree, the water. Where did it become non-mechanical?
You're postulating the possibility that there's some quality which we don't normally look at as being matter. You're postulating that somehow this is in communion with matter.
That's right. And in fact, I can give arguments from modern physics, quantum mechanics, which would back that up. You see, that so I'm suggesting this is another way to look at it, which I think is more accurate. It fits our knowledge better.
It's like saying that the atom in a rock has an order or some intelligence in it that makes it stay in that...
makes it what it is, yeah. It has a certain information or something or meaning, which makes it what it is. And that...
when, has an intelligence, well, I can use that word.
Well, rudimentary. And this gets more organized in a more subtle way, you see, but with living beings, but there's no break, you see, and that when a molecule of the rock molecule dissolves in water and it's taken up by the plant and we eat the plant and it becomes part of us, where did it suddenly become living, intelligent matter?
That would be too different from Bertalanffy's general systems theory.
What?
Would it be too different from Bertalanffy's?
Well, what would you say?
The general systems theory would say something similar to this.
Well, there may be other people who say something similar. I'm not trying to say it's completely original or that nobody has ever thought it. You see, in fact, these ideas have been current in human history for thousands of years. You see, in fact, the human race began with this idea. That was all these Stone Age peoples think just that way.
Where does creativity come in?
Well, we could come to that later, that this constant movement of information is creating new meaning. And as new meaning means new being.
David, could you make the distinction again? I know you've gone over this in other dialogues, between brain and mind.
Well,
in other words, if this is flowing from the implicate order,
yeah,
as we've discussed, and this is all from the unlimited, this is flowing, and then the sense that there is something centered here in this
well, that we must find, yeah. Well, that's where you raise the point, that if it's all that way, why do we experience it the opposite way? You see? But then we're going to explain that as the result of thought which has developed over the ages. People in the Stone Age conditions did not experience it that way. I mean, people who study them say they don't, and there's evidence that they didn't. It gradually developed through the growth of civilization, language, culture, technology, and so on.
I think what mankind has done essentially is that we have looked at the brain. Well, truly, it's a magnificent thing. Look at what it's done. The man on the moon made computers, relativity, quantum mechanics, but at the same time, we don't realize that all it is an organ. Why should it know be the be all and end all to everything? We don't look at it and perceive it that way. It's just it's an organ that nature has designed in the animal. What's the big deal? But we don't see it that way.
Yeah, well, it is an unusual organ. It has very tremendous possibilities, but I say that doesn't mean it's the beginning and end of everything.
That's exactly right. I mean, probably the photon, how nature designed and makes it a unit, whatever it does. That's as miracle and marvelous an invention as the human brain.
Well, it's really all one. I'm trying to say that the brain has grown out of all that, and in fact, the brain is constantly, the whole body and the brain are maintained as we breathe and drink and eat food, and so that in a short time, a large part of the matter is exchanged, and even the bones in a few years, and therefore we say what remains after 10 years is almost none of the original molecules, but still it's some order, some meaning has kept going, right?
So is it the pattern that stays? I read a book, a man Dorsey, the doctor who writes Space, Time and Medicine, and he quotes you quite a bit. And he said that every 5 years, statistically, we change all our atoms.
That's right, yeah.
So we're not the same matter, whatever that is. But nevertheless, we think the same, we feel the same, and we look relatively
well, similar would be a better word. We're not exactly the same either.
No, but it gives the impression of similarity and identity.
Yeah, but then we preserve similarity in this movement, so you see. And this movement preserves similarity, and that's the origin of all fixed forms, right?
Energy then.
The energy has a movement, it has a kind of intelligence in it or meaning in it which preserves the form, right?
When you say matter or form, do you mean energy moving in a particular pattern?
Is matter. Energy moving in a certain form is a kind of matter, right?
Is that a common definition of all matter?
Well, I think physics is implying that definition. You see modern physics that...
Quietness would be a certain recurrence of movement with certain similarity to each other.
Well, you see, we have to go into that, see, we haven't discussed yet we've discussed matter, but what about space? You see, we haven't time to discuss that now, at this point, but anyway. But evidently matter cannot have any meaning apart from space, right? And time.
Well, are those for sure separate, space and time?
What?
Are space and time separate?
Well, we'll have to discuss that. You see, there are a tremendous range of questions you can see, and they're involved in this fix the human race has got into. Right? Not getting clear on this question is one of the major reasons behind the ecological crisis. Right? You see, the primitive peoples were much more clear on it. They said, we depend on the earth. Our body, the earth is our body, the earth is our mother. We must take care of the earth, right? So they didn't think they were separate from the earth. See, it didn't look that way to them. They didn't experience it that way.
Don't you think somewhere, even though now the great bulk of everything you're talking about so far is how we experience it differently from that?
Yeah.
Don't you think that to some degree, underneath that, within that somewhere, we do also experience it that way?
Yes, I think so. Otherwise, what I say would have no meaning, right? You see, that somehow, what I say has meaning, it probably appeals to some level of experience that is not commonly brought out, right?
So then that feeling of separateness is just another incoherent thought? Is that what you're
Well,
saying?
it's been carried too far. That's what's incoherent, right? Yeah. It has its place, but it's carried too far.
When you say thought is a material process, meaning that it's the same as matter, is that because it's moving in a pattern?
Well, it's also just simply it's not separable. Like what I said about Soma-Significance means that. You see that not only is the Soma at every level, the body is significant. You see, this not merely all the things outside are significant, but all the things we were talking about, like the heart, the lungs, the abdomen, and the pain you got here and there, that's all significant, right? Has meaning and it affects your thought. But vice versa, that meaning affects the whole body and everything outside. You see, so I say that thought is inevitably a material process. At every level, we can look at it as a kind of material process, but at the same time, at another level, we look at it as meaning, which is more mental. Right?
Is sensitivity part of the material process?
I say that sensitivity is certainly part of the material process, yes. I mean, if you anesthetize the nerves, you don't have it.
There has to be something that gives significance to that.
Yeah. So when we say significance is still more subtle, we'll have to discuss this question of what is subtle, you see.
The significance would be to be aware of the program.
Well, that's what we're hoping to come to, but a much more elementary significance is this is a table, you see, right? And this is a flower. These are flowers, you see. Somebody else might not think that at all. He might think these are, green, white, pink objects, or, somebody who, or he could say, what is that? You see, to call, what is that? To call that a tape recorder depends on your certain significance. We could just call it a bit of technology or a strange object. If somebody came from the Stone Age, you wouldn't know what to call it, right?
Build something with them, put them together and build a house.
Yeah. Yeah, so the point now is that I'm trying to say that this whole process inevitably involves the body. Whether there's something beyond this whole process is another question, but we're looking only at this process, which I call Soma-Significant and Signa-Somatic. Right? It moves both ways at different levels of subtlety. Now, I think we're discussing this mostly intellectually, but I think it is appealing to some kind of experience everybody has had, which is subtle, right? It's not purely an intellectual construction. You see, but the intellect gives a map, and I think that map is pointing to something, some experience.
An energy that is moving.
Yeah.
And it's not personal.
Yeah. Well, it's universal. Right? So if you are in nature, you could just look at it that way, and you could feel that nature, you're taking in nature, and you're moving outward toward it.
Something within this field of me is creating a pattern.
Yes, well, it's your whole body, your whole nervous system, your whole memory. It all contributes, right? And also the whole culture has contributed to that. Right? So therefore we have to think this has been going on 10,000 more years, maybe 1,000,000 years. We have to think of our Stone Age ancestors. We were in the Stone Age for 99% of our existence. So
could we say that the culture has not transmitted all the Soma-Significance?
Well, it hasn't said much about it. Even the Signa-Somatic is very confused. It calls it psychosomatic, which is not a good term. You see, it leads you to think that the soul is somewhere inside affecting the body. But where will you find the soul? People then say, let's look for the soul. We don't find it here, we don't find it there. You can cut up the brain, you can do all kinds of things, you never find it, but it isn't, and that a separate soul is a wrong idea, you see.
It's spirit, which keeps it really nebulous.
Yeah, well, we have to discuss what are the meaning of those terms, soul, spirit, and so on. You see, they may have a meaning, but you see, it has gotten rather confused with modern science. No? So anyway, I think it's about time now to call a halt because we have to be there by 12:30 at latest for lunch.
There was somebody who talked so much about the soul, and then he was using the language in an abusing way. He would say, would you like to split that? Can I drop you there? Can I grab a hamburger? So I said, you talked about the soul so much, you give value to the soul, but the way you use the language, I remember Francis Plato said, abusing the language is suffering of the soul. To split, to grab, or drop. Said, I don't want to split. If you want to share, yes. And I don't want you to drop me to my motel. unless you want to give me a lift. I'm not the right to drop you, and I don't want to grab a piece of I don't want to leave you. So this became all of a sudden. And then the other day, talk about the soul, the sensitivity, but it's so effective the way the language can.
Yes, well, that's the meaning again. You
The
see,
meaning.
the language has meaning, and the meaning affects the whole system, the body, and everything. Right, let's stop now.